Hello everyone, Namaskar. So mains is going on and essay paper was already out, so we figured we'd discuss the essay paper. So in this video what we're going to do is we're going to take all 8 topics. Section A, Section B, we are going to look at ki bhai, acha, which were the most probable choices in both sections, because we ran a poll on Telegram, and this is something that happens every year. Every section mein there are 1 or 2 topics which have a much higher priority for most people, kyunki these are topics which you have a lot more examples for, right? But that also connects to one of the biggest problems with the essay, which we'll talk about in a bit. Now, beyond that, what we'll do is her topic ko leke, I'll explain the core idea of the topic over here. Obviously, we will not be discussing the whole essay. There will always be, more examples than I can count over here. Because essay is one of those papers where if you keep an open mind, it's a very fun paper to write. Although for that reason it also becomes one of the most difficult paper for a lot of people, क्योंकि there is no set formula, there is no set pattern कि भाई क्या करना है ऐसे में. Right, so with that out of the way, let's get started. Now, section A में these were the 4 choices that were given. As you can see, number 2 and number 4, most people were choosing these. And इसमें भी number 4, when 2 elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled. This was the one that a lot of people chose to write. For the simple reason, बहुत सारे examples हैं आपके इसके पास. अभी का US का ईरान conflict जो चल रहा है, जिसकी वजह से मिडल ईस्ट पूरा burn हो रहा है, तो a lot of examples come to mind. Similarly, a grateful mind is very beautiful. This was the second most probable choice, क्योंकि इधर बाकी ये जो दोनों है इस section में, these are quite difficult choices if you do not have the right context. Like for example, इसमें अगर आपको oxymoron का मतलब ही नहीं पता है, तो definitely you're not writing this essay. Although if you understand the meaning of oxymoron, this can be a very fun essay to write, as we'll discuss. Second section में क्या हुआ? Number 2 and 4, these were the 2 choices that were chosen by most people. यहाँ पे हमने एक poll check भी डाला था. So I've shown it here because otherwise somebody might have said कि यार ये percentages are not matching up. So ignore, but a well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers was the most chosen. So one option, पिछले में भी इसमें भी हमने देखा, almost 50% of the people are choosing to write one particular option. And that is always how it is, and that is how I would recommend that you also write. क्योंकि बहुत बार लोगों का दिमाग एकदम सेकंड ऑर्डर पे चलने लग जाता है पेपर के बीच में, दैट दे थिंक एवरीबडी इज गोइंग टू राइट दिस, सो आई एम गोइंग टू राइट समथिंग एल्स. प्लीज डोंट डू दैट, because if you have a lot of examples for this, if you have a lot of ideas for this will be your best essay, and that is what matters. Not कि भाई मैं कुछ अलग ही लिख दूं, कुछ और ही essay लिख दूं, ऐसा कोई essay मैं लिख दूं जहां पे मेरे कोई examples नहीं है, so then you will lose marks. You want to write your best essay. Now, because of this, अब होता क्या है कि like this topic and this topic before it, when 2 elephants fight, people have a lot of examples, and then generally what I see is कि भी essay paper जो हमारा होता है, you are supposed to write 1000 to 1200 words, right? Roughly this comes out to 10 to 12 pages. You are writing about 100 words a page. मतलब अब font size, line spacing, all of these things will matter. Variable थोड़ा रहता है. Assuming you have 15 pages total, तो उसमें 2-3 पेज छूट जाए, इतना आपको काम करना है. The biggest problem that I have, and this is my constant gripe with people when I'm teaching the essay course also, is that generally what happens is कि in these 10 to 12 pages, intro हमारी जो रहेगी, that will be 1 to 1.5 page. Right, conclusion जो हमारा रहेगा, that will be again 1 to 1.5 page, and the remainder of it will be filled with just examples. Every page पे what I'll be getting is, and this is जो लोगों का बहुत ही एक favorite वाला वो analysis का pattern होता है कि I'm going to talk about individual, then family, then community, then nation, then international. Right, तो ये वाला analysis करते हैं, तो पहले इंडिविजुअल का एग्जांपल दे देते हैं कि भाई व्हेन 2 पीपल आर फाइटिंग और व्हेन 2 एलिफेंट्स आर फाइटिंग. सो फॉर एग्जांपल इंडिविजुअल के केस में या फैमिली के केस में हो जाएगा व्हेन 2 पेरेंट्स आर फाइटिंग, तो इट इज द चिल्ड्रन दैट गेट ट्रैम्पल्ड. फैमिली से ऊपर जाओगे, कम्युनिटी के केस में हो जाएगा दैट लाइक टू पीपल फाइटिंग, तो देन यू नो नेबरहुड गेट्स ट्रैम्पल्ड एंड अदर इलाके में प्रॉब्लम हो गई, नेशंस फाइटिंग। यही चलता रहेगा पूरे एस्से में। एस्से में इट इज नॉट जस्ट अबाउट द एग्जांपल्स, इट इज व्हाट इज द argument that you're building. The argument needs to be supported by examples. And if you can do that, तो मुझे कुछ फैंसी नहीं चाहिए। If you have solid arguments supported by even basic examples, you will score above average marks. क्योंकि the average individual, what are they doing? They're just dumping examples. Dumping examples is not the way to go here. जीएस में दैट वर्क्स क्वाइट अ बिट, कि जीएस में हम क्या करते हैं कि भाई 10 मार्क का क्वेश्चन है एंड भाई 10-12 पॉइंट हमने लिख दिए, सब में एग्जांपल डाल दिए, कोई अच्छा है कोई खराब है कोई मतलब नहीं। एस्से में इट इज अबाउट द आर्ग्यूमेंट कि भाई कहना क्या चाहते हो, बिकॉज इफ यू आर नॉट क्लियर अबाउट द आर्ग्यूमेंट द एस्से विल कम आउट कंफ्यूज्ड, एंड दिस इज व्हाट इज एक्चुअली बीइंग चेक्ड इन दिस पेपर, कि भाई व्हेन यू आर गिवन द स्पेस ऑफ 10 to 12 15 पेजेस, can you create a logical argument for why you agree or disagree with this, right? So this is also an important point in the essay, that you can disagree. In fact, if you disagree with the topic of the essay and you can write a convincing argument, you generally tend to score really well. मतलब पिछले साल के जो कुछ essay के toppers थे, one of them that I know of, there was a topic that truth knows no color. The individual wrote an essay that truth does know color, and that was his entire essay, scored 140 marks, right? आज की डेट में essay में इतना ही चल रहा है, this is a very good score in essay. So you can disagree with the topic of the essay provided you give me the arguments. जबरदस्ती के लिए नहीं करना कि नहीं ये तो गलत है, भाई मैंने बोल दिया गलत है इसलिए, you give me the logical arguments. So disagreement is possible in the essay, and you have space to give that disagreement your a lengthy treatment, कि भाई इस कारण से ये जो चीज बोल रहे थे सही नहीं है। हालांकि इस बार के जो essays आए हैं, there is not a lot of space for disagreement in these essays. इस वाले में एक में था, right, a good leader is one who follows the followers. तो इस पे when we come to it we'll talk about it. Now let's get started with the discussion. Now the first essay when we come to, in this essay, if you do not know the meaning of this word oxymoron, then this is not an essay you should have chosen. Now oxymoron क्या होता है? It is a contradictory phrase. Like for example, an oxymoron is open secret, right? If it is a secret, it should not be in the open. If it is open, it is no longer a secret, but open secret is something that is used, right? Like another example can be benevolent empire, right? Benevolent empire is the idea कि भी जो empire है वो बहुत ही बढ़िया, सबके लिए बहुत बढ़िया करता है, but keep in mind, if it is an empire, it has defeated enemies. So no matter if you are saying that the empire is benevolent to its own people, it has also been not benevolent to its neighbors. So this is the idea of oxymoron, कि it has a contrasting flavor, and there are two ideas over here which do not go well together but also convey something important, right? तो इसके चलते हुए you have to reflect, oxymorons reflect the ironies of life, right? Now if you understand oxymorons and if you understand ironies of life, this is a essay worth writing. क्योंकि ironies of life क्या है कि it is rarely that I feel just one emotion completely, right? Whenever I feel a strong emotion, it is also mixed with other emotions, right? For example, let's say कि भाई as a 18-year-old you went to college, right? तो you were obviously excited about the fact कि भाई नए शहर में जाएंगे या कुछ होगा नया होगा, कॉलेज में जाएंगे, you've heard so much about college is such a wonderful space, but at the same time you are also apprehensive about the fact कि भाई यार बिल्कुल ही सब कुछ नया हो जाएगा, I'll be meeting so many new people, right? So both of these things exist together. On the one hand you're very excited, on the other hand you're also a little apprehensive, right? Similarly, look at your parents, that if you get into a good college they are very happy for you, but they're also sad about the fact कि yeah, my kid is gonna go away and I'm not going to see them as often. And in fact मोस्टली यही होता है आज की डेट में कि भाई आप कॉलेज जाके फिर उसके बाद जो भी कुछ कर रहे हो, you're staying away from home for an extended period of time. So parents also have that bittersweet feeling, right? So another oxymoron for you. Bittersweet. So somewhere or the other, these ironies of life are actually reflected very well in these oxymorons. क्यों? क्योंकि irony of life क्या है कि चीजें कभी भी बहुत सिंपल नहीं होती, दे आर ऑलवेज कॉम्प्लेक्स, राइट? यू लाइक समवन बट यू ऑल्सो लाइक समवन एल्स, राइट? तो रिलेशनशिप्स में भी ये प्रॉब्लम रहती है. तो दीज सॉर्ट्स ऑफ इश्यूज आर वेरी वेल एक्सप्रेस्ड इन टर्म्स ऑफ ऑक्सीमोरॉन्स. तो लाइक फॉर एग्जाम्पल ऑक्सीमोरॉन में ओपन सीक्रेट की अगर हम बात करते हैं तो अ वेरी वेरी नाइस इंट्रोडक्शन इन दिस पर्टिकुलर एसे कैन बी कि एवरीबडी, राइट, बचपन में everybody has heard the story of the hare and the tortoise, right? Hare and the tortoise. There is nobody who has not heard this, right? And in this story, as kids, we are told कि भाई जो hare है ये भाई मतलब he's very fast and very capable of winning the race, but क्योंकि उसको लगता है कि भाई ये तो हो ही गया and then goes and sleeps before the finish line. Tortoise, just working slowly and steadily, wins the race. Slow and steady wins the race. You have been told this since childhood. And yet, everybody thinks कि भाई मेरे को tortoise तो नहीं बनना है, slow and steady क्यों जीतना है? I will be a hare, but I will be the smart hare. Right? This is what everybody thinks. कि मैं तो ना स्मार्ट हेयर बन जाऊंगा एंड आई विल क्रॉस द फिनिश लाइन वेरी क्विकली, आई विल नॉट स्टॉप एंड वेट बिफोर द फिनिश लाइन. सो दिस कैन बी कंसिडर्ड एज one of the ironies of life. This is an open secret that everybody knows that slow and steady wins the race, but nobody wants to do the slow and steady work. Everybody wants the smart work technique कि भी स्मार्ट वर्क कैसे करे, जल्दी से कैसे काम हो जाए. So this becomes a very nice and powerful intro in this essay. Again, you can have 10 different intros. This is what came to my mind. तो यहां से हमने कर दिया स्मार्ट हेयर एंड टॉर्टोइस. देन वी स्टार्ट डिस्कसिंग कि भाई अब एक्चुअली बात करते हैं कि भाई आर्ग्यूमेंट क्या है. What are we discussing? What do we want to talk about over here? The first question or the first section of your essay should deal with कि भाई what exactly are oxymorons? Yeah. Rather, what are the ironies of life? You want to discuss what are the ironies of life very very clearly, and यहाँ पे आप बहुत सारी ironies ले सकते हो. आपकी personal life की ironies ले सकते हो, public life की ironies ले सकते हो, between nations आप ironies ले सकते हो. Give me some examples of ironies. 2, 3, 4 should be good. Now, the second section of the essay should talk about कि भाई okay, oxymorons reflect this. क्या ये रिफ्लेक्ट भी करते हैं इस चीज को? एंड लाइक वी हैव डिस्कस्ड कि इफ यू आर क्लियरली डिफाइनिंग आयरनीज ऑफ लाइफ, यू विल फाइंड प्लेंटी ऑफ ऑक्सीमोरॉन्स, दीज कॉन्ट्रास्टिंग वर्ड्स, क्योंकि आयरनी इसी चीज पे बेस्ड है कि मैं खुश भी हूं, मैं दुखी भी हूं, मैं गुस्सा भी हूं, बट मैं सैड भी हूं, राइट? तो ऑक्सीमोरॉन्स आर एक्चुअली रिफ्लेक्टिंग दिस. 1 or 2 पेजेस इंट्रो हमारा हो गया, लेट्स से 1 to 2 पेज. आयरनीज ऑफ लाइफ हो गया 2 पेजेस. ऑक्सीमोरॉन्स रिफ्लेक्टिंग दिस 1 to 2 पेज. उसके बाद अब हम बात करेंगे कि भाई व्हाई इज इट द केस, व्हाई आर ऑक्सीमोरॉन्स रिफ्लेक्टिंग द आयरनीज ऑफ लाइफ सो वेल. सो देयरफॉर नाउ नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज व्हाई. अब व्हाई में जब हम बात करेंगे सो देन इट विल कम आउट कि भी कहीं ना कहीं लैंग्वेज हैज डेवलप्ड इन अ वे टू एक्सप्रेस थिंग्स दैट वी फील. तो ऑक्सीमोरॉन्स, इट इज नॉट लाइक समबडी डिसाइडेड कि आज हम ये नया ऑक्सीमोरॉन बनाएंगे. Oxymoron is actually reflecting something that we are feeling, and there is that complex feeling, and that word just captures that complex feeling, right? Bittersweet. Bittersweet becomes that complex word which captures a very complex feeling. Therefore, language in time has developed in such a way that this was the reality, and language has evolved to reflect this reality, right? तरीके से हमने क्या किया ओवर द कोर्स ऑफ, कितने पेज हो गए हमारे, 1 2 4 5 6 7. नाउ वी ऑल्सो वॉन्ट टू हैव अ इन्वर्जन, राइट. इन्वर्जन क्या होता है? इन्वर्जन इज द सिंपल आइडिया कि भाई, is it possible that there is an opposite side of this spectrum also? An opposite side of the spectrum is present over here. The opposite side of the spectrum is pretty simple, in which कि जैसे bitter sweet, right, open secret. तो ये oxymorons जो हैं, these are generally combination of two words, right? They're combining two feelings, two emotions. But in reality, if we talk about it, reality is not just हमने we have upgraded our model from saying कि okay, there is not just one emotion, but we have only limited manner में उसको upgrade किया है कि there are two emotions. But in reality, there are multitude of emotions, right? तो ये जो inversion है यहाँ पे, we will talk about a false dichotomy, right? So for those of you that are watching this video, please keep in mind that this is just one possible inversion. You can say other possible inversions also. बहुत सारे अलग तरीके से. inversion का क्या आइडिया है? I want to try and create the exact opposite of this statement, because in an essay there should be a counter argument. सिर्फ एक साइड की आर्ग्यूमेंट आप देते रहते हो तो वो आर्ग्यूमेंट हल्की रहती है. यू हैव टू गिव अ काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट. सो दिस इज माय काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट ओवर हियर कि यार ये ऑक्सीमोरॉन करता है, इट डज रिफ्लेक्ट कि भाई व्हाट आर द आयरनीज वी आर फीलिंग, व्हाट आर दीज थिंग्स दैट वी आर फीलिंग, बट येट इट इज लिमिटेड. It does not convey everything, right? So that becomes my structure of the essay कि भाई false dichotomy को 1-2 पेज और मैं कर दूंगा, 8-9 पेज मेरे हो गए हैं, and finally I come to the conclusion, right? conclusion में what I can do कि भैया hair and tortoise वाली चीज को मैं वापस यहाँ पे कर सकता हूं, और I can also talk about कि भाई as language evolves, as we are able to convey more things, as we learn more about ourselves, we become better at expressing ourselves, we become better at expressing complex emotions, and it wraps up the entire discussion कि भाई language की भी बात कर ली हमने, because oxymoron is a structure of the language. Ironies of life की भी बात कर ली हमने, which is a reality, which is something that has to be there. It is, prominently featured in our essay. So this becomes a flow of the essay. Now please keep in mind, this is what has happened over here. I have a lot of examples, but my examples are serving the arguments. ये arguments अगर आप progressively बनाते चलते हो तो this becomes a good essay. Now obviously I am just talking about the skeletal structure of the essay. You have to fill it up. You can disagree with my sections, you can create different sections. If you want कि भाई अच्छा you want me to discuss your sections, let me know in the comments. And this is true for any of the topics. किसी भी topic पे अगर आप mains दे रहे हो या you just want to practice, let me know what other sections you would create or what different sections you would create in the comments. Which brings us to the second topic. Now this was, as we saw, one of the more common options. A grateful mind is very beautiful. तो like अब बोलने के लिए it's a very simple topic, but it can get a little complicated. क्योंकि अब क्या चीज, what is beautiful? What exactly is beautiful? अब जैसे बोला जाता है beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So that is beautiful over there. Now beauty in the eye of the beholder के अलावा like aesthetic beauty होती है. Beauty is something that pleases the senses, right? मतलब sometimes I will say a piece of music is beautiful. Sometimes I will say like the taste of this food is like wondrous, beautiful. Beautiful is something that is pleasing to the senses. And अब इस sense में अगर देखा जाए, you can define beautiful in any number of different ways, right? So this is a technique called abstraction. कि हमने एक शब्द उठाया इधर से and we have tried to define it in a slightly different way so that it makes it easier for us to understand. So I am defining beautiful as something that is pleasing to the senses. It can be pleasing to the eyes, to the ears. It can be a beautiful like fragrance, right? It can be a beautiful taste. It can be a beautiful sensation. So beauty somewhere or the other is something that is pleasing to the senses as I am defining it. Now Now we come to a grateful mind, right? कि भाई, how is a grateful mind very beautiful? So somewhere or the other, we have to discuss now कि भाई, what is a grateful mind? तो intro देख सकते हैं यहाँ पे. Intro में you can define very simply कि भाई, what is a grateful mind? What does it mean to be grateful? If you have a very simple, very basic intro, you can have that. In this particular essay, obviously, since it is grateful, तो ungrateful का एक natural contrast यहाँ पे आता है. तो intro में you can create that grateful versus ungrateful. Plenty of examples you can build. आप कुछ एक कहानी बना सकते हो कि भाई दो बच्चे थे, राइट, द फादर यूज्ड टू बी दिस दैट XYZ. एक बच्चा बहुत अच्छे से लेता था उसको, दूसरा बच्चा बहुत अच्छे से नहीं लेता था उसको. One kid was grateful, did well, other kid was ungrateful, did not learn the lessons that were supposed to be learned. You can make up some story, right? Now we have to talk about कि भाई grateful and ungrateful. तो फर्स्ट सेक्शन अगर हम बात करते हैं यहां पे, what, how do you be grateful, राइट? कि भाई ग्रेटफुल ब्रीफली हमने यहां पे डिफाइन कर दिया. यू कैन ऑल्सो से कि what does it mean to be grateful and how do you be grateful. Now what does it mean to have a grateful mind, right? Please keep in mind, I also missed this, but grateful mind is the keyword. What does it mean to have a grateful mind and then how do you be grateful? तो इसको जब हम एक्सप्लोर करते हैं, so there will be a discussion which will come up कि when you are grateful, you appreciate what you have, right? If I am grateful, तो I will say कि the fact that I have these good clothes to wear, the fact that कि भाई I live in a time and age जहाँ पे चश्मे बनते हैं, because if I was living 200 years ago, chashmas were not that common in life. I am grateful for the fact that I have a smart watch, and I'm grateful for the fact that I get to teach. There are so many things that I can be grateful for. And as soon as I start being grateful, I look at things in a very positive manner, right? You cannot be grateful and negative at the same time. This is not how the human brain works, right? So how do you be grateful के बाद next क्या आता है? Why is it beautiful? Now, as we have defined कि भाई being grateful, it just opens us up, right? We are very positive. So why is it beautiful? Because when I am grateful, I am looking for more things to be grateful about, right? If I am grateful in general and then somebody helps me out, right? छोटी सी भी चीज में कि भाई किसी ने मतलब मेरे लिए दरवाजा खुला रख लिया, या भाई किसी ने मेरी थोड़ी हेल्प कर दी कहीं किसी चीज में, किसी को मैंने टाइम पूछा उसने बता दिया, किसी को मैंने रास्ता पूछा उसने बता दिया. तो what happens is I am always looking at the positive side of things. I am generally very, very positive. Now, at the same time, in both of these sections, you can have the contrast running. कि भाई, what does it mean to be ungrateful? When I am ungrateful, I will always be constantly looking for कि भाई इसने मेरे साथ कैसे गलत किया, right? इसने मेरे को कैसे कम दिया, right? You remember वो जो बचपन में स्कूल में ऐसा होता था that you had to share a table with somebody else and like it used to be very competitive कि लाइन बनती थी बीच में एकदम कि ये मेरी साइड है, तेरा कुछ सामान इधर नहीं आना चाहिए, ऐसा नहीं. Like we could have been grateful about the fact कि we got to go into nice schools, but yet obviously we were children and होती हैं ये चीजें. तो being ungrateful simply क्या करता है कि then I'm constantly looking for transgressions कि तूने मेरी साइड पे कैसे डाल दिया, तूने मेरा हिस्सा कैसे ले लिया, हाउ हैव यू डन दैट, हाउ हैव यू betrayed me, how have you like taken something away from me. So what happens over here is if you keep running this contrast, we will start seeing that there emerges a giving versus taking kind of mindset. Right, giving versus taking में क्या हो रहा है? The person who is grateful is now happy to give, right? Because I have enough for my needs. I have had a full belly of food. So if I see somebody who needs food, I'm happy to give. Why? Because I'm grateful for the fact that I have enough right now. I can help. And therefore, the person who is grateful has that open mind, has that positive mindset, is willing to give. On the other hand, the person who is ungrateful has that closed mindset. What will they do? They will be more like, नहीं मतलब मेरे को आज खाना ठीक से नहीं मिला तो इसको भी नहीं मिले तो कोई बात नहीं, मतलब सही है इसके लिए. They are always looking at the negative side of things. So this contrast between giving and taking keeps coming up. You can give more examples over here. If somebody has this giving sort of mindset, how life also rewards them back, right? They become this positive person. Everybody around them wants to help them. Why? Because they believe कि yeah, this person has helped me out so many times, so I am also going to help them out whenever the chance arises. On the other hand, when you have this ungrateful person, like anytime you get the chance of कि भैया इससे कुछ ले लूं मैं, you will try and take it. So whatever we have gets reinforced in our surroundings and environment, right? And then giving versus taking और ये सारी चीज जो आके हो जाती है, it creates a self-reinforcing loop. So a grateful mind is very beautiful because it is focused on giving, and because it is giving, it is also getting back without thinking about getting back, right? अब यहां पे भी हमें एक काउंटर आर्गुमेंट कुछ तो चाहिए. तो एक काउंटर आर्गुमेंट जो यहां पे और आप बात कर सकते हो कि at times it can be confused that if somebody is grateful, they must be content माने कि मतलब वो संतुष्ट है, उनको और कुछ नहीं चाहिए. That is not always the case, right? So a lot of people don't want to be grateful because they feel कि if I am grateful then I will not try and achieve more things. कि if I'm grateful for the fact that I already have कि भाई मेरे को रोटी मिल रही है, मेरे को कपड़ा है, मेरे पे मकान है, तो मुझे और क्या चाहिए? No, that is not always the case. I can be grateful and yet I can try and be more. I can try and achieve bigger things. I can try and do better. Being grateful doesn't necessarily mean that you are content. So there is sometimes this false equivalence that is created. And therefore people feel that I don't want to be grateful because I want to achieve big things in life. You will never achieve big things in life if you are ungrateful. Because in order to achieve big things in life, you need people to help you. You cannot build a business without somebody on the other side transacting with you. And if the person on the other side is constantly thinking कि ये 2 रुपया मेरे से मारने की कोशिश कर रहा है, you will never have a long lasting business relationship. You will never have like a partner who will trust you to do the right thing. क्यों? क्योंकि तुम हमेशा वो मतलब ये मेरे हिस्से का है करते रहोगे. So therefore, I can be grateful and yet I can try and do more. I can try and do better for myself, for my family, for my loved ones. So that can be a very good counter argument over here. कि भाई being grateful doesn't mean that you are content. You can do bigger things to spread the beauty that is there in your brain around you also. Right? Structure. And finally, we can have the conclusion. Conclusion में again जो grateful, ungrateful वाला example अगर story if you have shown in the beginning, you can echo that story in the beginning. कि a person who is grateful कि भाई okay, even in the household, some people can be grateful, some people can be ungrateful. It can depend on कि भाई किसी इंसान की वजह से आप हो. It can be because of environment, right? कि भाई sometimes it just happens that एक सुनामी आ गई, earthquake आ गया, COVID हो गया. COVID wreaked havoc on so many families, on so many people, that you can choose after this कि भाई no matter what I did, like कुछ हो गया ये मेरे कंट्रोल में तो था ही नहीं, तो then why should I be grateful for anybody? What has the world done for me? But that doesn't help you with long-term growth. In order to grow long-term, you have to be grateful. If you are grateful, good things will happen. And ये अब वही वाली चीज है, you can end with that कर्म किए जा फल की चिंता मत करे इंसान. Right? If you remember the Sanskrit shlok, कर्मण्यवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचनम, you can write that. Now, whenever you're writing these sorts of shlok and all, तो एक तो you can write in Sanskrit if you know it, right? And then you also write the translation of it. Be grateful and do the work that is in front of you, and the rest will take care of itself. संस्कृत में लिखना सिर्फ don't just write it in Sanskrit or in any other language for that matter. If you're writing some other idiom, you also translate it because you don't know whether your examiner can read the language that you are writing it in, right? So examiner can be from anywhere pan India, so you also write it in a translation in whatever medium of language आपका है पेपर का. If you're writing in Hindi medium, Marathi medium, English medium, whatever medium you're writing, you translate it into your medium language. Right. So that brings us to the second question. Third question पे आते हैं. Here, a thorn is a changed bud. Right, a thorn is a changed bud. Now, this was a topic, I don't know why this was a topic that had a lot of potential and possibility, and that is what we want to talk about. That what does a bud represent? It represents potential, does it not? Ki a bud is, let's say, a child, right? A child is full of potential. If a child is constantly laughing, we take it to be कि this is a happy child. But if an adult is always laughing, sometimes we'll think this ये ढोंग कर रहा है कुछ, ये मतलब नाटक कर रहा है, इतना खुश नहीं है ये. Right? If a child doesn't smile ever, we just take it to be कि अच्छा ठीक है, this is how the child is. They don't smile. There are very few people that they smile at, and then people are just trying to कि भाई I should be the person that this child smiles at. If a person is like that, what do you say? ये तो खड़ूस आदमी है, ये खड़ूस औरत है, ये किसी पे स्माइल नहीं करती, ये इसको पता नहीं क्या मतलब, दे आर हाई एंड माइटी. तो व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इज दैट व्हेन इट इज अ बड, देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ पोटेंशियल, देयर इज नॉट अ लॉट ऑफ ascribed meaning on top of that bud. Right? Now the essay is talking about that bud has changed into a thorn, meaning that person with that potential or that thing with that potential underwent some change. They went through some life events. Now change can be because of a person, change can be because of events, right? Multiple things can happen. So something led to change, and now they have become a thorn. Now they have become something negative. Now they have become something that is very closed off, that is, if you try and approach them, it will hurt you, right? You don't want to touch a thorn. And what do you want to do with the thorn? You want to break off the thorn, right? That is what we generally do with thorns. We appreciate the rose, and to get to the rose, we cut off the thorns. So a thorn is a changed bud. What this essay is sort of allowing us or asking us to do is to look into what makes a thorn. A person is not born as a thorn. A person becomes a thorn. So how does that happen? So that becomes the sort of story of the essay. कि भी intro में you can talk about that child versus adult का जो comparative story that we just talked about, or you can have 100 different similar ideas कि भाई this is a thorn, this is a rose, this is a flower, right? कि भाई a bud can become any of those things. A thorn is something that happens when specific events occur, right? So intro after child adult के बाद the first section of the thorn, or the first question that we want to answer: what makes a thorn? How does a person, or what causes that change कि bud changes into a thorn, right? So here you can discuss this idea कि भाई sometimes it can be like events, right? Bad things have happened in your life. It is just कि भाई it was a series of bad luck. मतलब nothing you could do about it. Like think of it as कि like you were born at a time of social upheaval. कि भाई you were born 1947, partition happened. Like if you were living in any of those areas, did you choose कि भाई कहाँ पे आप पैदा हुए? No, you did not. You were born there, and just so it happened कि भाई because of partition, because of forces that were much bigger than you, you went through some horrific experiences, and that changed you into closed off person. This is actually the reality of a lot of people who faced partition. कि people who have parents, grandparents who faced partition, they tell कि भाई इन लोगों से मतलब like they can't let go of things. It's very hard for them to let go because during their formative years, they faced so many challenges and so much, drastic upheaval in their life कि it's just very difficult for them to let go of things. And they will start hoarding things. कि भाई सब कुछ इकट्ठा करके रख लो, घर में कचरा भर गया है अब, but according to them, they don't know when it might be useful because constantly they are thinking about the fact कि यार कभी भी वैसा दोबारा हो सकता है, right? So the thorn that they have is because of that event that happened, right? Similarly, a person can become a thorn. Like for example, जो ब्रिजभूषण हमारे wrestling federation के रहे थे, now that guy has been a thorn in so many people's lives that people have started growing thorns because of him. कि भाई यार मतलब they came just for the sport, but like there is this person and like what are they doing, what is happening, and चल रहा है, हो रहा है. So in such a case, you can talk about these things कि भाई what makes for a thorn, and like possibly potentially I gave you the example of Brij Bhushan. Political example है, preferably if you can avoid it, you can choose different examples in the exam hall क्योंकि again we don't know who the examiners what they're doing. Now once we have discussed this कि भाई what makes for a thorn and like क्या है a changed bud, कि भाई can that potential be reclaimed, right? Because here we have learned to empathize with the thorn. We have empathized with this person who is like not so pleasant, who has these quirks, who has these like traits of personality, but we have learned कि भाई there is a reason for that. Now that we have empathized with them, we also need to see कि is it possible for them to become less thorny? Can that potential be reclaimed, right? Because अंत में चाहते तो हम like we want कि भाई everybody should have a good life, everybody should have a happy life. If there is somebody who's maladjusted, so like how can we reintegrate them in society? Can it be reclaimed? Now if we are going with the metaphor कि भाई a thorn is a changed bud, so in biology once something has become a thorn it's very difficult for them to change back, and that is also true with humans, that once somebody over like many years has become this sort of a negative and like in defensive and prickly person, it's difficult for like them to completely change. But we can like mellow the thorn, we can sort of reduce the sting a little bit, right? So this is something that we can discuss over here. Can the potential be reclaimed? Can they be mellowed? Can they also learn to adapt and evolve? And from there we go to कि भाई, is it possible that sometimes like अब अगर reclaim नहीं कर सकते 100%, तो are thorns useful? Right, because that is also a question that you can ask. Thorns are also at times things that we require. Like for example, I'm sure धुरंधर देखी है सबने. Right, so धुरंधर में the character of Hamza, he's a thorn, right? He has gone through these horrible, terrible like events that have happened in life caused by particular people, and because of that he cannot trust people, he cannot like do anything. He has become a thorn, but even the thorn can sometimes be useful, right? So like that becomes our sort of broader outlook at things. Ki just because somebody is a thorn, they are prickly, they are not integrated or well adapted, they still have use in society, because society itself is so large, is so varied, that there will always some use for even like hard and difficult people. So that becomes our sort of counterpoint, counter view on this. Now इसके बाद अगर हम बात कर रहे हैं कि काउंटर पॉइंट काउंटर थीसिस कर लिया है हमने, thorns can also be useful. So thorns are useful के बाद a thorn is a changed bud. Now we can wrap it all together and we can say just because somebody is a thorn doesn't mean that they need to be plucked. How do you deal with a thorn? Right, so I think there are plenty of movies which have this theme of there is this old grumpy uncle, and that grumpy uncle doesn't like anybody, and like eventually over the course of the movie that grumpy uncle also just like gets along with okay, these people are fine, I'll get along with them. Or that grumpy uncle only starts getting along with a few people. So you can have a lot of these movies ka sort of examples over here, because movies give us like very extreme examples. कि भाई हमजा का example from धुरंधर हमने ले लिया. I think I'm not sure. Piku is a good example over here. Amitabh Bachchan ka character is like very annoying in the beginning, but he is like lovable but annoying at the same time. So then how do you deal with the thorn? Right, it's a difficult parent, it's a difficult individual, and yet they are integrated and adapted, because अंत में conclusion हमारा क्या आएगा? We can echo that child becomes into that adult. So like it is society that led to those situations, and therefore society should attempt to integrate thorns also, but at the same time it should not be कि भाई all thorns need to be integrated, right? So over here I think there also needs to be like some discussion about the fact that some thorns actually need to be cut away. Not all thorns are useful, not all thorns are useful. Some might be useful, some might be like figured out in a way, but there will always be people who are maladapted, people who are fighting against the state. कि भाई अब मैं बोलूं कि हाँ I can try and understand somebody who's trying to bring down the Indian state, कि भाई Naxalism for that matter, कि भाई death to the Indian state. So okay, I can try and understand their emotions, but do I agree with them? No, I don't. So then sometimes you do need to cut a thorn away, right? So you can deal with the thorn both ways. You can try and soften the sting of the thorn, and at the same time, if the thorn does not soften, you need to cut it away. तो अंत में एक असेसमेंट हुआ कि भैया चाइल्ड जो था ऑब्वियसली वेरी प्योर, अडल्ट इज थॉर्नी. We try and pass an assessment on them. If they are not to be redeemed and reclaimed, the thorn needs to be cut away, because the benefit of the larger group is paramount. That is what matters most in the end, because if society does not exist, you and me don't exist, right? Because we are not growing our own food. We are dependent, interdependent system, part of a whole where we need the system to work, because without the system it becomes very difficult for each individual to do the thing that they are doing. So fun discussion can be done this way. There are other aspects to it that you can cover over here. You could disagree with my breakdown of it. All that I am trying to display over here is the fact that essay में argument है एक, यहाँ पे हमारी argument चल रही है. We are trying to explore that argument with examples. Movies का examples will be very very good over here, right? For example, I think what was that movie, क्या नाम है, शोले, right? शोले में Gabbar is obviously a thorn that needs to be cut away, right? But Thakur is also a thorn, right? Thakur is also not a very easy person to be around. Not like, doesn't talk a lot. The काम से काम रखो, दफा हो जाओ, ये करो वो करो. But again, he is a useful thorn. Why? Because he is ridding the worst thorn of Gabbar. So a lot of movies ka examples you can quote over here, because movies give you that entire arc. In real life, if you know a lot of biographies, if you know a lot of examples, those are also great examples to use here. But arguments going from an intro to a conclusion and exploring the topic through and through. Which brings us to the next point. Now this was, as we saw, almost half the people in the first paper wrote, our first section wrote this essay. When two elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled. Now intro ke liye, there is a great example over here, current war that is going on, and this is sort of now the trick. Everybody is going to write about US and Iran. Can you think of another example? मतलब अभी recent wars जो चल रहे हैं उनमें naturally ये सारी चीजें होंगी, but instead of the very obvious examples, the way to stand out is not to choose a different essay. The way to stand out and get better marks in an essay is to choose different examples over here. US and Iran, I'm not saying it is a wrong example. I'm not even saying it is a bad example. It is a good example. It is apt. If you don't get anything else, use that. But you should spend some time and effort trying to think of, okay, what is another possible example that I can give here? Like for example, like one of the other examples that somebody mentioned on the Telegram channel where the discussion was going on was कि when two parents are fighting, it is the children that suffer the consequences, right? So if in this essay somebody has written this sort of an example, very different, it just sets the tone, because examiner is also bored, right? Please keep in mind the examiner is not getting paid a lot of money to check your copies, and the examiner is pretty chill. They are not very concerned about the fact कि भैया हाँ ठीक है नंबर देने दे देंगे. If you make the examiner stop think of it as कि भाई whenever you're scrolling on social media, sometimes there is a piece of content that just makes you stop, right? कि भाई ये क्या बोला, ये क्या हुआ, इधर कैसे हुआ? That is what you're doing with your writing. If you can stop the examiner from glazing out कि भाई हाँ ठीक है एक और ईरान essay, you are like okay. If you can stop them just for a moment, you have a chance of scoring well. Obviously, you have to follow it up over the next 10 pages with good arguments. If that is not the case, तो then थोड़ा मुश्किल रहेगा. Now, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled. देखते हैं अब इसको क्या क्या चीजें यहाँ पे हो रही हैं. इंट्रो हमने देख लिया. Some either US, Iran, or you can talk about even Israel, Palestine, and like people getting crushed over there. You can talk about the two parents fighting and children bearing the brunt of it. Whatever intro that suits you, whatever tone you want to take. ऐसा नहीं है कि भाई वो use कर लिया तो you can't use this in the middle of the essay. You can. You will have space. Now, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled. So first question that comes up कि भाई elephants अगर हमारे लड़ रहे हैं, so why can't they fight elsewhere? Right? Why can't they fight elsewhere? That is sort of a genuine question that comes up. So briefly, maybe you can mention that, but again, that is beside the point कि भाई ये घास में क्यों लड़ रहे हैं. A better question to ask is it inevitable? कि भाई क्या घास जरूरी? Is it necessary कि भाई ये तो होगा ही होगा? Because there being the discussion कि अब इसमें वो दूसरा discussion भी आ जाएगा कि possibly the elephants can go and fight elsewhere, but why are the elephants fighting? Because the like grass is where the fight is. The elephants probably are fighting about grass or probably about mates. Where are the mates going to be? Where the grass is. Why? Because elephants are eating the grass. So elephants are also eating a lot of other things, but it is possibly a fight of the resources, right? तो resources पे झगड़ा हो रहा है तो फिर वहीं कुछ ना कुछ होगा. And is it inevitable for grass to get trampled? So you can have 100 different examples. कि भाई old wars you can talk about, in the animal kingdom you can talk about, and here the metaphor you can explain a little bit. कि when two elephants fight, it is the grass that get trampled. तो grass क्या है? This is the common individual, right? कि भाई US and Iran are fighting. There's two powers are fighting. And the common people who are working, let's say in the Middle East, a lot of Indian migrants are working over there. They are constantly stressed about the fact that I don't know when a bomb is going to blast off over here. I am just here to earn a living. So is it inevitable? Is it unavoidable for that to happen? एक बारी हम इसका बात करते हैं तो we find out कि yes, we can try and make some efforts about कि भाई okay, how does the grass not get trampled? But most of the time the grass will possibly get trampled. So next question comes up कि भाई right, how do we minimize the trampling? कि okay, elephants are going to fight somewhere or the other, possibly mostly on grass. How do we ensure that they don't damage a lot of the grass? So here I think a very good example of something called war crimes. Right, what is the idea of war crimes? Geneva Convention and a lot of these conventions which came up after World War II was that obviously like war is inevitable, some or the other country is going to fight, but they should not damage civilians, or they should not hurt civilians intentionally. They should avoid civilian casualties as much as they can. So was this not an effort at trying to reduce the trampling? Because we know maybe trampling is inevitable, but we can try and prevent it as much as we can, so that later on people have been tried as war criminals कि भाई you also intentionally hurt civilians. So that sort of a discussion can happen over here. अब इसके बाद how do we minimize trampling? तो अब minimize trampling हो गई. Can you prevent the elephants from fighting? But I think this is a question that will be sort of covered up over here also. Is it inevitable for grass to get trampled? So if I can prevent fighting, I should have prevented fighting in the first place. but fighting is inevitable. Sooner or later, human jealousy, human emotions will run high, and कुछ ना कुछ झगड़ा होगा. ईरान एंड यूएस का चल रहा था, ऐसा नहीं था. But then, a wild leader appears out of the blue and they decide कि भाई नहीं, अब से हम इनकी नहीं सुनेंगे. Is it something that you really want to? So, can you prevent fighting? Probably not. Maybe you can delay it for a while, but it's going to happen. Grass is going to get trampled. How can I minimize trampling? Now, if we zoom out a little bit, right? So this is where we want to talk about a little bit of the counter perspective. Okay, if we zoom out a little bit, so if I look at it, right, there is just a lot of grass. Even if two elephants are fighting, even if, like, there are, these elephants are fighting, grass will remain. There is no way for the elephants to trample all the grass and destroy it completely. The grass will remain. No matter where you go, what happens, like, society will survive, and eventually what will happen is that those elephants will die and their decomposing remains will be taken up by the grass. So अब यहाँ पे, like, it sort of becomes slightly difficult, because, like, now what you're saying is कि people will die and, like, society will survive. So maybe you want to just maintain the metaphor कि grass will remain and elephants will die. And metaphor में आके और यहाँ पे counter perspective, I think this was the most sort of plausible counter perspective that I or at least that's the one that I liked most. कि grass will remain. No matter where the elephants are fighting, no matter what they're doing, grass is going to outlast and outlive those elephants. And sort of, you can say that grass will have the last laugh. So, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled. But does the grass care in the long run? Not a lot. Naturally, when we translate it to humans, so therefore, the people who are lost in those fighting, it is an immeasurable loss, because each individual that is lost is connected to a lot of others, and all of them will feel that loss very keenly. And that does impact the elephants fighting in that area, did impact a lot of people. But the grass overall will remain. Overall, the grass doesn't really care, because the grass is so abundant that no matter how many elephants are fighting, the grass will remain. And that sort of gets us around to some point. Now, this for me, I would say, might have been my weakest essay. So, like, you can figure if there is another point that you can add over here. If I had to write, I would have probably written Grateful Mind bhi sahi tha. I think oxymoron I liked the most personally, because again, I knew oxymorons and I really liked this idea and I really liked my intro over here. So therefore, this is the particular essay that I would have written, because I like those ideas. Most people wrote this essay. For me, might have been my weakest essay. So this is what you have to keep in mind, कि you play to your strengths. क्योंकि अब मैं यहाँ पे जाके कहीं ना कहीं अटक जा रहा हूँ कि grass will remain, okay, like I don't have a very strong conclusion over here. So, like, this is where you can also chip in over here. If you thought that you would write this particular essay, let me know in the comments, like, how would you want to conclude this essay, right? Which brings us to the second section. Second section में आते हैं, nature is the symbol of the spirit. So over here you should be very, very clear on what is nature, what is the spirit, and like how it is symbolizing. Right, so let's discuss this. Now, isme a very brief, very simple intro can be कि you define what is nature or you define what is spirit. Right, nature, if I have to define, I can say कि nature is, like, everything that is outside of us, that has not been created by us, that exists independent of us. Right, कि man made वगैरह वाली चीज में नहीं, everything that exists independent of humans is nature. Right, if humans were not there, we would not have laptops, we would not have screens, you would not have phones. But everything else, the galaxy, the stars, like they would exist. They don't really care about the fact that humans are here or humans are doing xyz things, right? So nature is that. Now what is the spirit? Now spirit is again something that's very hard to define. What is the spirit? Spirit is the innate part of you, things that are very hard to explain, right? Ki bhai, sometimes जैसे like animals are used to describe people, right? कि हिरण जैसी आंखें हैं, right? What does that mean? कि भाई somebody has very big eyes or like the eyes are on the side of their head? No, it is the fact that they have very pretty eyes, because deers have a very pretty eyes. Similarly कि भाई चीते जितना तेज भागता है ये, तो चीता is the fastest animal, so therefore like that is how somehow one part of the spirit of the individual is being captured in the animal. Right. So in that manner, what is the spirit? Spirit is something that defines us, something that is inside of us, and something that drives us. Inside us, drives us. You can define it in very different ways, but in this essay, it is very important that you define these terms, because आपका जो prompt है, that is a very, very small prompt. And therefore, it is very important that you define both of these things. Okay, everything that exists regardless of humans. Right? Ki bhai, everything that exists regardless of humans. So all the rivers, all the mountains, all the like stars, all the galaxies, everything that exists outside of us, it is all nature. Whether we understand it or not is something entirely different, but it exists. It is part of nature. Now, this is a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Right, and he was like a great thinker from US who was part of a movement, a transcendentalist movement in the West, which is again something that is very, very innate to each and every one of us here in India. कि भाई in India, जैसे for example कि भाई गंगा मैया बोलते हैं, right? गंगा मैया है कि भाई भगवान में, अब जैसे सागरमथा is which is the name of Everest, it is considered like holy. There are plenty of mountains which are considered holy in that sense कि भाई there is a spirit that is ascribed to those mountains, spirits that are ascribed to rivers, spirits that are ascribed to woods, right? So that is the idea that Emerson was trying to convey over here. कि now in the intro, let's talk practical कि intro में अब क्या हो रहा है and conclusions and all में क्या करेंगे. Intro, you can simply define nature or you can define spirit. Please do define it even if you want to do it after the intro. You can also use some of those examples. Sometimes things that are in nature are used to describe the spirit of individuals. Why? Because that spirit cannot be captured in just words alone. If I say that this person runs very fast and then I say कि चीते की तरह दौड़ता है ये, so there is an image that comes in your head when I say कि भाई this चीते की तरह दौड़ता है ये. Whereas if it just runs fast कि हाँ भाई दौड़ता होगा तेज, तो there is a difference. There are some indescribable things that come into your head anytime that I use a symbol to describe the spirit. So this can be your intro. Examples of कि भाई how this has been used. Right? We used कि भाई हिरण जैसी आंखें हैं and बांदर जैसी चाल. So that's the idea. If somebody is jumping around constantly, they have too much energy to like ये क्यों बंदर की तरह उछल रहा है, right? That is how we describe it. So that can be one of your intros. But then we want to talk about कि भाई what is nature, what is spirit. ये दोनों चीजें ideally first couple of pages में we should define. Then we want to talk about कि भाई how is nature symbolizing the spirit, right? Or like we can talk about कि भाई spirit in nature that is in us, right? कि ये इंसान जैसा है कि भाई ये पर्वत जैसा स्थिर है, right? That is the spirit of nature that is in us, right? Because the moment we try and describe कि भाई natural things are describing the spirit in us, we are also ascribing a certain amount of spirit to nature. या फिर इसको हम नीचे कर सकते हैं, spirit in us that is in nature, right? What is the spirit in us that is in nature? कि we sometimes refer to people as कि ये बादलों की तरह क्यों गरज रहा है, right? ये नदी की तरह क्यों लहरा रहा है, right? ये फूलों की तरह क्यों लहरा रहा है, या like we use a lot of these metaphors कि भाई to describe what people are doing or describe the nature of people, right? Describe the spirit of people. So what is this spirit in us that is from nature? And then इसका opposite आ जाता है spirit in nature that is in us, कि यहां पे वही things that we started out with examples कि हिरण जैसी आंखें हैं, चीते जैसी चाल, बांदर जैसी छलांग, right? Like you can have 100 different examples over here. You can obviously, like I'm just trying to create the structure outline of the essay. तो एक बार ये चीज हमने बात कर ली कि what is in nature, what is spirit, spirit that is in us, because always keep in mind that we ascribe outside of us what is inside us, right? If I am angry, I will only notice things that are annoying me now, right? कि then I will notice कि भैया ये इतना मतलब हवा शोर क्यों कर रही है, why is the wind making so much noise, right? Why can't the river be quieter, and all of these things. And then when I'm calm and quiet and when I'm peaceful and happy, I will notice that the wind is so serene. The wind is so peaceful, right? It is the same wind. The wind did not change. But when I changed, I noticed the spirit of nature changing with me, right? So this is spirit in us. It is my, emotion that is now I'm ascribing to nature. Ki why is this wind angry? Why is this wind howling at me? Right. On the other hand, spirit in nature, this person is like that piece of nature. So these sorts of examples you can say. What is this doing is that this is highlighting the idea that symbols are being used both ways. Nature is symbolizing what is in us, and what is in us is being symbolized by nature, right? तो दोनों चीजें यहाँ पे हम डिस्क्राइब कर सकते हैं. Now इसमें काउंटर व्यू क्या आएगा अपना? Counter view is pretty simple, straightforward. कि भाई nature doesn't care. Nature is apathetic. Nature, मतलब it is us that is ascribing meaning to nature. कि भाई हिरण जैसी आंखें तो like that's beautiful eyes. हिरण like didn't evolve eyes for our pleasure or like for us to say that these are beautiful. Hiran had eyes. Right, cheetah was just running fast because that was the evolutionary advantage. Nature doesn't care. We are the ones ascribing the meaning to it. We are the ones that are like, when we are looking at Milky Way at night, we are the ones calling it Akash Ganga. Right? Milky Way doesn't care. Milky Way doesn't even know what is Ganga. And for that fact, in the time scale of the Milky Way, Ganga is something that is like immaterial. Right, Milky Way has existed for like billions of years. Ganga is like a very young river. By that fact, you were 25, 30, 40 million years ago. So this is the counter example over here. Okay, sure, we use nature to symbolize the spirit. We use the spirit and symbolize it with nature. We do all of these things, but that is us ascribing meaning to things that are outside of us. Nature is immaterial in that sense. Yet, at the same time, now we can conclude. Conclusion, may we can talk about the fact कि what a symbol does is that it describes something that is difficult to capture in words. And since nature itself is something that can never be fully captured in words, therefore, using an undefinable quantity to symbolize another undefinable quantity does make sense, right? Even if it's not perfect, even if it is us ascribing the meanings, it does convey sense. Because when I say कि भाई बांदर की तरह उछल रहा है, you do get the point. And that is the purpose of using them as symbols, right? Language is symbolic. So conclusion mein we can talk about that meaning is conveyed, even if it is us doing the conveying. So framework, follow this, you should do well in this essay. Let's go to topic number 6. Now this was, I think, one of the more common ones. This was second wale mein, this was the top one, right? This was the most chosen essay in the second section. A well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers. Now, that's a good prompt. तो अब यहाँ पे सबसे पहले हमें क्या करना है? We want to define कि भाई what is our well-educated mind? What is a well-educated mind? Right, a well-educated mind is a mind that has been trained. It is a mind that has been exposed to a number of ideas. Education क्या है? Education is the process by which we get exposed to new ideas, we discover ourselves, and we learn how to learn more. Right? So an educated mind is something or somebody who has learned how to learn. And if I define it this way, so please keep in mind whenever I am defining something, तो जैसे nature and spirit वाला जो अपना ये prompt था, इसमें it is based on how I define nature and spirit that is going to define how the tone of my essay is going to go. It is up to me. It has been left up to me. I can say that this is an appropriate way to define a well-educated mind. There can be 100 other definitions also. For the purposes of my discussion, I choose this to be the topic, or this to be the way that I want to describe a well-educated mind. A well-educated mind is not something or someone that just knows facts. That is not well-educated. A well-educated mind is now capable of building theory out of it, is capable of, getting to a bigger sense and able to connect the facts. And how do they do that? If there are gaps in my knowledge, I know how to fill them. This is a mind that has learned how to learn. You don't need to teach it anymore. This is a mind that is capable of now teaching itself. That is what I would call well educated. Because as soon as I do this, learned how to learn, so then it is automatic, sort of. Kyunki in order for me to learn, I have to ask questions. How does this happen? Why is that the case? Any time that I ask such a question, I will learn something new. And that thereby, बहुत ही एक briefly, अगर even just in the intro, right? This can be my intro. Right in the intro itself, I can define कि भाई a well-educated mind is something that has learned how to learn. तो फिर हमने इसमें सारा बता दिया कि भाई just remembering facts and ये वो XYZ. But once you learn how to learn, this mind is now capable of educating itself. This I would consider well-educated, because education never ends. You are constantly learning something new. Why? Because life is like that. The world is like that. Knowledge is like that. Knowledge never ends. If this is my intro, so then we talk about why do we need questions? Right, so then, like with the question, we will try and understand what is the purpose of questions, because questions are directing our inquiry. Questions are telling us okay, this is what we are working on right now. And once I have a question, so then kahin na kahin a well-educated mind will try and find कि भाई अच्छा इसकी वजह से क्या हुआ था, पहले क्या हुआ था, बाद में क्या हुआ था. It will try and come to the answer. Right, so next part हमारा क्या है? importance of answers. Obviously, a well-educated mind needs a lot of questions. It is only when you are curious about something. It is only when, let's say you saw some video which is talking about black holes can also be wormholes. Now suddenly you're very interested. Okay, black holes can be ways to fast travel through space, and now you're interested in theory. Now you're learning a lot of things. Eventually, you'll come to some answers. Is it a wormhole or is it not a wormhole? Right. So therefore, you need an answer, because without an answer, I'm not making any progress. I cannot fully verify a question, because a question is just like open ended. An answer is concrete. An answer is telling me, okay, these are the next steps. So, this is the importance of answers. So, a well educated mind should never be lost in, okay, question per question per question, because that will lead to inaction. And that is a very, very good inversion to have over here. Why you can't have only questions, right? That is a very, very important part to discuss over here. We need questions, but you can't have only questions, because if you only have questions, you will not make any progress, because you will constantly be like, ye answer hai, okay, no, but I can probably get to a better answer, sure. But progress happens when there is an answer, right? Laptops get built when there is an answer कि भैया नहीं इतना size का laptop बनाते हैं. Otherwise, I can keep asking the question कि what is the perfect size of a laptop? Is there a perfect answer? No, there's not. If a person is very big, they can do well with a big laptop. If a person is small, they can do with a small laptop, right? The answer depends on the person who's buying the laptop. So in that case, what is the idea? You cannot deal only with questions. You have to have answers. You need questions. Answers are important, and just questions are not going to get you anywhere. This is not a well-educated individual. A person who is only asking questions and never finding answers is not, we would consider, well-educated, because then it is just constantly going in that loop. It is not coming out of that loop, because learning how to learn, well-educated mind, why is it considered well-educated? Because it is doing something for the rest, right? It is doing something for humanity. It is making progress. Just because you got very educated and just did not do anything else, you just kept learning, that is not a place to be, right? Because then you are just consuming. You are not creating. You are not producing. You have to produce. You have learned all of these things. Now, like, the least that you can do is teach. You can obviously create bigger things. You can build a lot of things. A well-educated mind that has learned how to learn must also now go out into the world and change things, right? So that is how I would address it. And you need questions. Questions obviously can be internal, can be external. External questions we have talked about, how does this happen, how does that happen. Internal questions can also be like, am I thinking this right? Or, right, am I misleading myself? Right, there are a lot of these mental models that we have that allow us to think better. So these questions can be both internal and external. And still you need answers to both of them. I can't just constantly keep going to therapy without actually taking steps to improve my life. No matter how much therapy you take, the therapist is also going to tell you कि भैया ये कर लो जाके. जब तक वो करोगे नहीं, तो then you're not going to make progress. That is the importance of answers. Questions are important, but only questions are not going to get you there. So finally, what do we end with? Conclusion mein, a well-educated mind must give back. Right, this is connecting back to one of the earlier themes, grateful, and that a well-educated mind must give back to society in answers, and yet hold on to the fact that the answers that you have found today may change tomorrow. A well-educated mind is not limited by tradition. A well-educated mind can think from first principles, right? So I think first principles thinking you can talk about here, or that maybe you can also add in the intro. So that's the idea. कि भाई in this topic you can have a lot of questions, you can have a lot of answers, and I think if you have these key checkpoints, you will do fine here. Now, moving on to number 7, shelving hard decisions is the least ethical course. Now, naturally, this was, I think, this was hard for a lot of people. Most people did not choose this. Most people chose up now first wala. And second wale mein, I don't think there was a second clear winner. Right? This was not it. Shelving hard decisions and nature a symbol of spirit. These were hard. Good leader wale cheez pe, a lot more people had worked. Now, shelving hard decisions is the least ethical course. So what is happening? First, we need to talk a little bit about what are hard decisions. Hard decisions is where you have to choose between two either equally good or two equally bad choices, right? So whenever hard decisions sort of a situation comes up, people tend to generally think about, okay, I have to choose between two bad options. No, that is not always the case. Even if I have to choose between two very good options, both of them are good, that can also be a hard choice, can it not be? Right? What are hard decisions? Positive and negative. Choices between two positives and two negatives, both of them will be hard decisions. If it is a choice between a positive and a negative, it is not a hard decision. It is relatively easy to do. Now the first question comes up. Why do we shelve hard decisions? Right? Because this is a tendency that a lot of us have, that we tend to delay hard decisions. Why do we tend to delay hard decisions? Because hard decisions take a toll on you. You don't want to choose because you don't want to commit. Think of it as let's say that you are in a bad relationship, right? And you are in a bad relationship and you want to end that relationship, but it will hurt. It will be a difficult conversation, and the other person will get upset at you, and obviously it will lead to a lot of acrimony. It might lead to a fight. It might lead to a lot of public embarrassment. A lot of things can happen. It is hard. And the other part of it is that you stay in a unhappy relationship. You know that you are not happy, you are miserable here, and yet you stay because the other side is also pretty hard. So what do? We shelve it. We throw it down the line. We'll take that decision later. And this is something that we generally tend to do because we are thinking by avoiding this, maybe it will resolve itself. It usually never does. Particularly, if it is a choice between two negatives. If it is a choice between two positives and you've thrown it down the line, you might lose both those opportunities, right? So therefore, not a great choice there either. Now, we have understood that shelving hard decisions happens. But we need to also understand why is it least ethical? Because please keep in mind कि ethical obviously nahi hai कि you were in a bad relationship and you're choosing to throw it down the line and deal with it. But why is it least ethical? It is unethical for sure. कि you are in a relationship, you are leading the other person on thinking कि maybe you will fall in love again. You probably won't. But that's the idea. कि it's a bad decision, but why is it the least ethical? Why it is the least ethical? Because if you know something, you must take responsibility of it. You have a personal responsibility to take that decision. If you know, if you are the one that has fallen out of love, you are the one that needs to communicate it, right? The other person is not suddenly going to wake up and realize कि यहाँ तो कुछ हो ही नहीं रहा है. And I think there's a very nice stand-up special on this by Daniel Sloss, where he's like, have you ever been in a relationship where you think, You just fall out of love and then you think life would be so much easier if the other person just died. Like, you don't want to hurt them, you don't want like bad things to happen to them, but it would take away that decision from you, right? That much. That's how like hard we want to shelve it. And that is why it is also one of the least ethical decisions. Why? Because you are the one that has fallen out of love, so therefore you are the one that has to be the one to communicate it. It cannot be the other way. And you choosing not to do it is misleading the other person, is being unfaithful to your own feelings. And like that is what makes it least ethical. Now, isme or 100 different examples you can take. Obviously, we are just exploring one example. But these are two important arguments that need to be covered here. Why do we shelve them? And why is it the least ethical? Both of these things are core part of your prompt over here. So what is happening is we are pushing the pain down the line, and it is not like that it is going to resolve itself. It is probably going to come back and bite us in the ass much harder. Like continuing with that relationship example, if like you don't do it now, it is going to happen 6 months from now, and it is just going to be worse because you will have become a lot more bitter, and things will just get like harder. The inverse of this is obviously sometimes things do resolve themselves. Sometimes things do resolve themselves. Now, this is why it's important to do essay ka PYQs, right? Because this is, I think, a topic from 2025 mains ka essay, which was ki muddy waters are best cleared by leaving them alone. Resolving hard decisions is the least ethical course. Muddy waters are cleared by leaving them alone. Muddy water is a hard decision, best cleared by leaving them alone, right? Here it's saying least ethical, but sometimes it is actually the case कि things do resolve themselves. Like, think of like अब ये जो relationship वाली बात कर रहे थे हम, कि let us say that these people, okay, they hadn't fallen out of love. It is just that they are under a lot of stress, both of them, and because of that they are fighting constantly, and it is just very very stressful, and like that makes like one of them think कि maybe it is like it's not working out, maybe we should end it. And eventually what happens is that as the stress clears out, okay, both of them had very hectic jobs, and both of them maybe had a kid, and everything was just like getting too much, and फिर parents का भी कुछ issue हो गया, तो like just like life got very hectic very suddenly, and because of that so much stress, they were taking it out on each other, and one of them thought कि it's not working out, when actually once the stress cleared out, things were fine. So in that case, things did resolve themselves, and this person learned something new, that maybe you need to look at the situation before you try and come to the realization that break up or divorce is the way to go. Things do sometimes resolve themselves, but this should be a chosen path when you have considered, not because you are kicking responsibility down the line. Yahan pe kya ho raha hai? We are kicking responsibility down the line because the choice for us is hard. When the choice is hard and I'm kicking it down the line, that is irresponsible for me. That is the least ethical thing to do. When I have chosen strategic inaction, then it's not unethical, and that is sometimes something that can work out for a lot of people, right? So I think that is about this particular topic. Conclusion पे आ जाएंगे अब इसके बाद हम. Conclusion में you can talk about कि भाई taking hard decisions. You can quote Spider-Man, that with great power comes great responsibility. And at the highest level, if we're talking about the political level, so what happens is कि their decisions cannot be delayed any further. That is where the decisions have reached, where everybody else was delaying it. But that person who has the most power has also the responsibility to take that decision and not kick it down the line. Because if you are doing that at the highest level also, that's hard. And like that is going to cost everybody. So it is your responsibility, it is your duty to take that hard decision, because if you just run away from it, somebody else will take it for you and you will not probably like what is going to happen. So great power comes great responsibility, which brings us to the last one. A good leader is one who follows the followers, right? So this is a essay about leadership, so you should be clear on, like, who is a good leader, what is a good leader, and what does it take to be a good leader. So intro mein you can give some examples of good leaders, you can give some examples of people who have followed the followers. Now, what is the idea of following the followers? Following the followers is simply that you are taking into account what the people that you are leading want, right? And naturally, that is something that a leader should do. A leader should be empathetic, a leader should be like able to listen to the people that are following them, because only then will they be considered a good leader. If you are a leader who doesn't really care about what people are saying or doing in XYZ, you are an autocratic, totalitarian type of leader, and people will overthrow you the moment they have a chance, right? So obviously that is not a good leader. So a good leader, you define some of the characteristics of what makes for a good leader, or good leader stories, or you can just contrast good leader, bad leader. You can have a contrast in the intro. There is one person who's not listening to what the followers are saying, there is one person who's listening to what the followers are saying. This is a good leader, this is a bad leader. Intro mein we have shown a contrast. So the first section that we want to talk about is what qualities of a good leader. So this is something that is beyond this. Ki bhai yahan pe maybe one or two things we have talked about. We now want to go deep dive into ki bhai what are the qualities of a good leader. You want to talk about somebody who is empathetic. You want to talk about somebody who is patient. You want to talk about somebody who is willing to listen, has to be a good listener. A person who is not a good listener can not really be a good leader, because you really do need to hear what people are saying, right? So you have to talk about what are the qualities of a good leader, and why do they follow the followers. So here we talk about some of the qualities of a good leader, and now here we would want to talk about a lot of examples. Here also examples, but lot more examples over here. How are they following the followers? What is the idea? Here you can talk about efficient civil servants kaise hain aapke, who are effective politicians around here, and like all of these sorts of things. You have plenty of examples, general examples dene hain yahan pe do. Which brings us to like the counterpoint of this essay, which I really want to talk about a lot more in this essay. Personally, I would want to talk about more about that aspect. A good leader is somebody who is following the followers, but that means that they are not a visionary leader. Leads. Right. A visionary leader doesn't mean that this person is not listening to the followers at all. But a visionary leader is like, a good leader is saying ki, like, okay, people are saying we should do this. Good leader is saying, okay, this is the way that we should do this. A great leader, a visionary leader would be somebody who will say ki, that is what we should do. Right. अब यहाँ पे obviously you can have great amount of examples over here कि भाई Abraham Lincoln, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and like if you're feeling adventurous, you can even mention Prime Minister Modi. Right. क्योंकि अब जैसे like one of the initiatives that the Prime Minister has taken is Viksit Bharat 2047. Right. Now that is a vision. कि भाई by 2047, by the time that India is 100 years independent, India should become a developed nation. That is a vision, right? Otherwise क्या है कि okay, economy needs to grow at 7%, 8%. हाँ जी ठीक है, we'll figure out how to do that. But a vision कि no, we have to be developed by the time we reach there. So we work back from that then vision. And then maybe we see कि maybe 7-8% is not enough. Maybe we need to grow faster. We need to do other things. But those ideas would not have come without that vision. So a good leader follows the people. A great leader leads the way. A great leader is what is at times required, because good leaders are just like, okay, generic. During times of crisis, during times of great improvement, great upheaval, when you really want to get ahead, you need a visionary, you need a great leader. Now, a great leader should be able to disagree with the followers. A great leader should be able to disagree with the followers and yet convince them to follow them. They should be able to reprimand their followers ki no, you are not thinking big enough. You need to think bigger. You need to try this other thing. Like for example, Gandhi ji, non-cooperation movement, right? Non-cooperation movement may, after the incident of Chauri Chaura, he disagreed with his followers. Everybody wanted that movement to continue because that was for the first time in Indian history, in modern Indian history, that a mass movement of that scale had been organized. And yet he disagreed and called it off. Like he was written off as a leader for the next 7, 8, 10 years. Ki bhai Gandhi to done. And yet he came back stronger every time because he had that vision and he was willing to disagree. He was willing to stand on his principles. So this is the idea that I would rather want to convey in this essay. I don't 100% agree with this topic. A good leader is one who follows the followers. Sure, this is a leader that, like, middle mein chalta hai. But when great events are happening, when the world is changing, when things are moving drastically, you need a visionary leader, a leader who can show you where to go. Right? So, therefore, I would spend a lot more time in the inverse part of this essay rather than on the first part of this essay, because I have a lot more to talk about over here. I really believe that that is the case. And right now, you can also then talk about in the conclusion ki state of the world. In the state of the world, you can talk about ki bhai, right now the world is undergoing a once in a century upheaval where great powers are changing places, right? Where Americans are no longer the preeminent power in the world. The Chinese are rising. We have a moment. In this moment, we need a visionary leader, not a leader who is just following the people. End it on a strong note. Viksit Bharat 2047 is maybe something that you can also mention in the conclusion over here. Ki the Prime Minister currently is showing that way. Ki there has to be that grand vision. And people will be measured up to that grand vision. Ki that guy, ab jaise, obviously Prime Minister Modi is probably not going to be there around by till 2047, right? It is like 2026. 20 more years is like a hard ask. So, if we don't achieve it by then, people will be judged by that. There was a vision, there were efforts made at that time, there was the groundwork laid, but it did not materialize, and the people will be blamed for it. So, right, visionary leader. So, that's the idea. So, I think in this essay, we finally get the counter view as the stronger argument, and you disagree with the main topic. And I think if you do that, you will score much better. So in the second set, I would have gone for this particular essay because I feel a lot more strongly about this particular topic. Similarly, in the first one, I would have gone for that. Hamara kya tha? Right, oxymorons. So that's it for the discussion of the essay video. If you have any doubts, questions, or if you feel kiwi some of the things that you would have done slightly differently and you want to discuss, let me know in the comments. And all the best.